From CBS Washington, in color, Face the Nation, a spontaneous and unrehearsed news interview with Senator Edward Kennedy, Democrat of Massachusetts. Senator Kennedy will be questioned by CBS News correspondent John Hart, Ward Just of the Washington Post, and CBS News correspondent Martin Agronsky. We shall resume the interview with Senator Kennedy in just a moment.
Governor George Wallace was shot and critically wounded today at a campaign rally in Laurel, Maryland. CBS News cameraman Lawrence Pierce filmed the attack. Wallace had finished speaking to the crowd of 1,000 that left the stand to shake hands with his admirers. The gunman was among them and fired at close range.
Direct from our newsroom in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and Roger Mudd in Washington, Lawrence Pierce in Washington, David Dick in Silver Spring, Maryland, and Richard Threlkeld north of Hue in South Vietnam.
The shooting in the shopping center of the Maryland suburb near Washington came just after Governor Wallace had addressed a generally friendly crowd.
Our regular programs for the next 8 hours so that ABC News can bring you full coverage of the 1972 elections. ABC News presents complete nationwide coverage of tonight's Election 72. Brought to you by J.C. Penney. Tomorrow morning, our 1,700 stores and our catalog will be waiting to help you find what you're looking for. Now, from election headquarters in New York, the anchormen of the ABC Evening News, Harry Reasoner and Howard K. Smith.
Good evening. Well, at last, the long wait is over. Tonight, we find out whether the pollsters were right and there's going to be a Nixon landslide. Partly right, he'll win a modest victory, or whether they were wrong and McGovern's going to win. As you...
Good morning from New York. I'm Sonia.
Live, the up-to-the-minute Channel 2 News at 11 with Rollins Smith, Michelle Marsh, Len Berman for Warner Wolf, and Mr. G with the weather.
Good evening, everyone. The fight for the Falkland Islands may have already begun.
Cell anemia and the race for second place. I'll tell you about the men who want to be lieutenant governor. Another bomb found in New York, the fourth since Friday. Ma Bell rings up big profits this Mother's Day, and Dennis live on Broadway with the opening of the new Tommy Tune musical, 9.
The up-to-the-minute weekend report, Channel 2 News live with Tony Guida, Randall Pinkston, Len Berman with sports, and Alan Casper with the weather.
Good evening. We will update the war news in the South Atlantic later on in this broadcast, but first, the top story in our area. And
good evening. I'm Morton Dean, and this is the CBS Evening News. The tension in two of the world's trouble spots exploded into military conflict today.
This is CBS 2 News at 11.
Good evening. I'm Laura Diaz. Paul has the night off. Here's the latest.
From CBS 2 Los Angeles, Laura Diaz, Paul Majors, Johnny Mountain with weather, and Jim Hill sports. LA's #1 late newscast. This is CBS 2 News at 11.
A warning tonight for pet owners. Sugarless gum can be deadly.
This is a CBS News special report. The Watergate indictments. This broadcast is sponsored by Bufferin, the headache tablet that gives you fast relief and is easy to your stomach.
Sir Edward M. Kennedy. Here in our New York newsroom, CBS News correspondent Harry Reasoner.
Good evening. Just a week ago tonight, Senator Edward Kennedy left a beach house party on Chappaquiddick Island, Massachusetts, to drive Mary Jo Kopechne to a ferry. He took the wrong route, and his car swerved off a narrow and unmarked wooden bridge into a saltwater pond.
Senator Johnson, face the nation. You are about to see the Senate Majority Leader and possible Democratic presidential candidate in his first television news interview program, Lyndon B. Johnson of Texas, face the nation in a spontaneous and unrehearsed interview with veteran correspondents representing the nation's press. Elizabeth Carpenter, Washington correspondent for the Little Rock, Arkansas Gazette and several Texas newspapers. Charles Von Fremd of CBS News. And Carlton Kent of the Chicago Sun-Times. And now, here as the moderator of Face the Nation is CBS News correspondent Stuart Novins.
As Majority Leader of the Senate, Lyndon Johnson has one of the most powerful offices in Washington.
This is Cat.
What's up? It's K-Dog.
This is Cool E from Sassy G Magazine.
You're watching K5, the home team. Hawaii's WB.
Tonight on K5 News at 9.
Family and friends remember the young victim of a tragic accident.
An unexpected wake-up call leaves quite a mess in Manoa.
And don't be a turkey this Thanksgiving when it comes to safety. We have tips on how to make sure your meal goes off without a hitch.
We are K5 News at 9. News 1 hour earlier with Stephanie Lum and Walter McCollum.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. About 200 family and friends bid a final farewell tonight to a 3-year-old boy killed in a...
Johnny Carson will not be presented this evening, so that we may bring you an NBC News special, The Nixon Transcripts.
If read with an open and a fair mind and read together with...
Channel 4, the #1 station for news.
This is NBC Nightly News, reported by Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. Nearly 2,000 American Marines and Army Rangers are on the tiny island of Grenada tonight after a lightning...
WSMV, Nashville. From Channel 4 News, this is The Scene at 10 with Demetria Kaladimos, Jeff McAtee, Bill Hall, and Rudy Kalis.
Good evening. You're watching WPTF TV 28, your NBC station. Now, Ben Garrett and Sharon Chester with news, Mark Barger with sports, and Van Coleman with weather. This is Newsbeat 28's Update.
Good evening, I'm Ben Garrett.
And I'm Sharon Chester. If you've looked outside in the past 2 hours, you...
Live from Boston, this is 7 News First at 4 on the news station.
We began with breaking news out of Colorado. 2 schools there have now been evacuated after a gunman storms into one of the buildings and takes several people hostage.
Good morning, I'm Annetta Wilson. The trial of a black woman accused of drug trafficking in Volusia County has been delayed after the judge stepped down. Yolanda Jackson contends she was targeted because she is black. Her lawyer says a county deputy will testify Sheriff Bob Vogel told them to target blacks and other minorities in traffic stops. No word on why the judge stepped down.
Got details on the terrible accident.
David Bernard in Weather Control. A soggy weekend. Will the work week start the same way? The forecast coming up next.
A big gator is creating a big concern for a local community.
Plus, no holiday on the water. A boat fire sends one person to the hospital. Hello, everyone. I'm Joy Purdy in for Beatrice Canals.
And I'm Jennifer Santiago. The news first and fast starts right now.
Now, live. This is UPN 33 News at 10.
He went from floor to floor.
The search for an accused rapist is over as investigators say they have found their suspect. Tonight, how detectives tracked down and arrested their rape suspect.
A television viewer actually recognized the suspect after surveillance video was played on the news late last week.
Well, tonight, that suspect's behind bars. UPN 30
in tonight, but they are still being counted. We'll have the race results in our live team coverage of Campaign 2006.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the new My 33 News at 10. I'm Beatrice Canals.
And I'm Jennifer Santiago. The news first and fast starts right now.
Now, live. This is My 33 News at 10.
Another soaking for South Florida as people across our area spent much of the day dodging downpours.
It is all clear right now as you take a live look outside where it is a nice night.
CNN International, this is World News Europe with Hilary Bowker in London.
Hello and welcome to World News Europe. Coming up on this edition, our top story, the fighting in Kosovo. Serb shells set off international calls for a ceasefire and a panic among refugees. From
Live from London and Berlin, this is CNN This Morning with the latest news, weather, and business to start your day.
Hello and welcome. I'm Terry Martin, sitting in for Bettina Lusche in Berlin.
From WKRN Nashville, this is Channel 2 News at 10.
Good evening, I'm Jill McSweeney.
Libyan MiGs that were headed for the Eisenhower.
Channel 5, News at 10, the #1 primetime news hour in Los Angeles. Now, Emmy Award-winning Hal Fishman, Debbie Davison, Larry McCormick, Joe Butita with sports, and the entire Channel 5 news team.
Good evening.
From KWGN-TV in Denver, this is Channel 2 News with Ernie Bjorkman, Glenn Gerber, and Jim Conrad. The Mile High City's only prime-time newscast.
Good evening, everyone. It's 9 o'clock in Denver. The number...
On the Independent News tonight, the tragic death of the 13-year-old girl who took her fears of nuclear war to the Soviet Union. School begins by telephone for an Indiana student with AIDS. The city subway system gets a failing grade in a strap hanger report, and the world's largest banana split.
Good evening, I'm Morton Dean.
And I'm Cindy Vandor.
The cause of the crash remains a mystery.
From KYW3, Philadelphia, this is a special election edition of the News Tonight.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Bruce Hamilton.
And a major new study on the high cost of extending life for only a short time.
This is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
Good evening. General Motors struggling to repair itself.
Tonight on Dateline.
I'm looking for
Dateline NBC with correspondents Brian Ross, Michelle Gillen, Deborah Roberts, John Scott, and Lee Thompson. From our studios in New York, here are Stone Phillips and Jane Pauley.
Good evening.
Tonight 92.
From NBC News, Decision 92 Election Night. From election headquarters in New York, here are Tom Brokaw and Bryce Gumbel.
Good evening. This should be...
This is the CBS Morning News for Monday, the 31st of May, Memorial Day. Good morning. I'm John Roberts. Here are today's top stories.
Coming up on Gold 33 News at 7.
We're picking up strangers and hitchhikers. And they do that every single day, 12 hours a day for a living.
Find out how taxi drivers are driving on edge after 2 violent attacks.
And I'm Morris Jones. Also coming up, he's a rising star in the Democratic Party, but could some unpopular comments derail his political career? And no apologies from an outspoken professor.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us for your only local news at 7 o'clock. I'm Rachel Smith. It began like any other night, but ended